Japan just proved something no central bank wants to admit. This wasn't a food tax cut, and it wasn't random volatility. This was the moment politics broke through monetary control, and the bond market took over. Last week, Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi called a snap election and promised to temporarily suspend the sales tax on food to ease cost of living pressure. On the surface, it sounded modest. In reality, it detonated one of the most violent repricings in Japan's bond market in decades. What began as a routine trading session in Tokyo suddenly unraveled. Long-dated government bond yields surged. The 30-year spiked, and the 40-year did something far more important. This wasn't panic. This was repricing, because control disappeared. For years, the Bank of Japan suppressed volatility through yield curve control. By capping yields, the BOJ wasn't just guiding markets, it was overriding them. Last week, that ceiling didn't crack. It vanished. When Japan's 40-year bond yield pushed toward 4%, it sent a message markets don't send lightly. The price of Japanese debt is no longer set by the central bank. It's set by investors. And the move itself was brutal. The 40-year bond didn't drift higher. It gapped more than 30 basis points in a single session. In ultra-long duration debt, that's not a pullback. That's a wipeout for pension funds and insurers that manage risk in fractions of a percent. Hedge funds were forced to unwind curve trades. Corporate bond deals were pulled mid-transaction. But the most important shift came from one group: Japanese life insurers. These aren't fast money traders. They are the final buyers, the diamond hands of the JGB market. And they stopped buying. When Japanese life insurers, the backbone of domestic demand, start hedging and selling their own government's debt to protect solvency, the floor disappears. That's when markets begin to spiral. Because the issue was never food prices, it was credibility. Here's the second-level problem investors understood immediately. When politicians say temporary, markets don't hear reassurance. They hear precedent. Japan already taxes food at a lower rate than everything else. And every time the national consumption tax rose over the past 30 years, food was protected. Not once was that protection reversed. Because once essentials are carved out, restoring the tax doesn't feel like fiscal normalization. It feels like taxing survival. That's political suicide. This isn't a Japanese quirk. During Europe's inflation shock, governments cut fuel and food taxes as temporary relief. When they tried to roll them back, voters revolted. In France, it triggered nationwide unrest. Elsewhere, the relief quietly became permanent. The UK has kept food zero-rated for decades. Canada has never reinstated sales tax on basic groceries. No modern democracy campaigns on taxing bread and milk again. So when Japan promised a 2-year food tax suspension during an election, bond investors didn't debate affordability. They priced irreversibility. That's why yields didn't creep higher. They jumped. And that's why traders started using a phrase no leader wants attached to their name: a Liz Truss moment. Not because Japan and Britain are identical, but because the trigger is the same: unfunded tax relief colliding with political urgency. Japan already carries the highest debt load in the developed world. The food tax suspension costs roughly $5 trillion a year. The government says it won't issue new bonds to cover the gap. Markets don't believe that, because once voters anchor to lower prices, reversing the policy before the next election becomes impossible. Debt issuance becomes the path of least resistance. This is where the deeper lesson emerges. Politics and economics do not move on the same clock. Politics responds to voters, pain, and elections. Economics responds to arithmetic, incentives, and constraints. When those clocks fall out of sync, instability fills the gap. That's why central bank independence exists, not to ignore voters, but to prevent short-term political pressure from overwhelming long-term economic reality. Once fiscal policy starts chasing approval instead of sustainability, markets lose their anchor. And when that anchor goes, reactions stop being gradual. They become sudden. And now comes the global risk most people are missing. Japan is the largest creditor nation on Earth. When Japanese yields spike, Japanese capital doesn't disappear, it comes home. Out of US treasuries, out of European bonds, out of global risk assets. This isn't just a Tokyo problem, it's a global liquidity drain. Japan isn't the exception, it's the first domino. Inflation makes voters impatient. Elections make politicians reactive. And debt makes markets unforgiving. The moment central banks are forced to absorb political risk, stability erodes. slowly at first, then all at once. That's the lesson Japan just taught the world. Markets don't demand austerity. They demand rules that outlast election cycles. Ignore that, and temporary stops meaning anything. Japan isn't the outlier, it's the preview. This is Global Notes by JP. If you found this helpful, comment, like, share, and hit the bell. We're building the strongest macro community on the platform. One signal at a time, together.